today is the second day of the TA 101 course, and as I've said to the folks who came with us, the content of this course is what has fueled my personal ability to stay, to come back to being okay. I'm not always okay, and in fact, this morning I had a meltdown with myself. So it's, and I want to model that it's a Western idea to think that we get to being perfect, and we get it. I read this native work that talks about 24 mistakes a day makes a good person. That's permission, that's permission to let go of the perfectionism of Western culture and of our Western scripts. So I try on how many mistakes did I make today, in addition to how many successes or how much good stuff that I feel today. So just a way of recognizing that that our worldviews inform us, and we'll be talking more about cultural scripts in the afternoon. As I was reflecting on yesterday, there are just a couple of thoughts I wanted to share for those of you who are going to be using this material and or thinking about transactional analysis and different ways of working with folks. And what we would hope is that our sessions like this will be increasingly more and more multicultural. There are a couple of things, three things that I just wanted to highlight for your consideration. The first one is to talk about the exercise that we did at the end of the day yesterday, and where we switched from the drama, which I love the idea of the drama versus the peaceful way of being in a relationship. So you got that theme, and that was the metaphor. At the same time, when we're working in cross-cultural settings, touch has different meanings for different people. And we talked about that in the context of strokes earlier. And so I wanted to just acknowledge that for some of us, physical touch by someone you don't know can be re-stimulating. And so if as that happened for someone, please know that we are sorry about that. That was a miss, and that we will continue to be sensitive to those kinds of issues and to encourage you to. So an option is to say, this is an exercise we're going to do for that, and if you don't feel comfortable doing that, it's okay. And if you don't want to be touched, it's okay. All right? Everybody get that? And then the second thing I wanted to raise up is that as I am growing into my awareness about non-gender binary realities and the use of and the ways in which English is so binary in terms of male, female, many of the folks in our group identify as they for various reasons, and we want to honor that, and so not make assumptions about how people define themselves in terms of gender identity. Okay, so those are two things. And then the third thing is, I was talking to some folks about Graham and Van and what I know about their history, and Felipe, and the idea of, as I am teaching in a multicultural context, it can be helpful to folks to hear what led me to that. And again, when we get to script theory, we'll talk about that more. But an example is, when I show up as a person of color, people may make certain assumptions unconsciously. We talk about unconscious bias, or that would be child-adult contamination in the TA model. People don't know my story, so they will fill it in. So if I share my story or a piece of my story, it really does help people get in the present and get out of their cultural scripts and assumptions about who I am. We were talking, Terry, can I use the example about the dancing and Terry taught us a dance yesterday that she had learned from a Shona woman, and Terry grew up in South Africa, has a lot of relationships with other African people, and people don't know her story. So some people might experience that as, here's a white woman teaching us African dance. So that's an example of how the importance of making sure that we're continuing to grow in understanding our own cultural stories so that we can use them as a part of our teaching and our training. Okay? Okay. With that, we're going to keep going, but I just wanted to contextualize, and I will do that again a couple times during the day.
All right, we're going to begin this morning with an exercise. So I'd like to have a couple of volunteers who are willing to role play for a few minutes, who are interested in getting to know each other better. Are there a couple of people who'd be willing to do that? Okay, good. Someone else? Good. The situation is this. You're in a doctor's office waiting to be called in for an appointment. And you've got a few minutes to spend before you're called in, and you can spend this time any way that you want to.
Yeah. So have you been to this office before?
Yeah, I love this doctor. He's really cool.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's a doctor of the people. And you know what? I say that because he's not negative. Like, every time I come in, I'm scared. And he's always like, you don't need to be afraid. Like, he can sense that I'm afraid, and he always says, oh, you don't need to be afraid. And he's always like, we have medicine for everything nowadays. So, you can relax. And I'm like, and he's a man of color, so it helps me feel comfortable with him.
Well, thank you for that information.
I send everybody here. I love him.
Yeah, no, I just came here. My Mass Health covers him, so it's free for me. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, and he's really great because I don't have health insurance, and he takes clients who don't have health insurance.
That's great.
Yeah, so he's awesome. Love you, Dr. Hisham.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better about this experience because I'm stressed whenever I come into the doctor's office.
Yeah, what do you got going on?
It's interesting that you ask that. I was thinking about asking you that, and then I was like, wait, is that appropriate to ask them why they're at the doctor? So I
feel that.
didn't. But if you want to talk about it, if you want to. I don't know you like that, but we can.
I mean, sometimes he takes a while because he's a man of the people. So.
Yeah.
But you don't have to share. I'm just keeping the conversation going.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I really had this moment of like, should I ask this person why they're at the doctor's office?
Yeah.
I am dealing with this dermatological issue that I've been dealing with for a while. And like I have been trying to like use holistic, things I read on YouTube or see on YouTube and like WebMD to deal with it, and it's not working. So I decided like let me go talk to a doctor.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I know that might have been weird, but I'll tell you why I'm here. So just to make it fair or equal. Okay. I have like this. It looked like a pimple, like it's on my gums, but I don't know what it is. It's getting a little bigger, and so I'm coming to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little nervous.
Yeah. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm 31.
I'm 32.
Oh, cool.
I feel like I'm in this stage in my life where I'm starting to notice like more health stuff, and it's weird, Like when I was in my 20s, I could really just like drink a bunch of water and whatever I was dealing with would go away.
Yeah. I felt easier for me to ignore some of the things. It's interesting that I feel like I have more concerns with my body, but also I really ignored my body a lot. So like I came to him first because I messed up my back. My back went out, and I didn't know why. I don't know what happened.
Your back went out? I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so I came, this is how I found him, why I went to the doctor, right, after many, many years. And he was just really helpful in kind of getting me feeling comfortable about being at the doctor and my back. So, yeah, that's kind of when I was like, I should start taking care of my body. It feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I keep coming back to that, When you said that, it made me think of my dad. My dad has had a bad back my whole life. So it's important. It's definitely important to figure that out. Do you do yoga?
I do, yes. I love it. I do more yoga at home, but there's a YouTube yoga person I love, Yoga with Adrian. So if you're not yogaing with Adrian, you better do it. So yeah, like she is my doctor. She has a bunch of videos. Sorry if I got a little loud. She has a bunch of videos.
Seems like a lot of people here know who that is.
Oh yeah, she's very popular. But she has a bunch of videos on how to take care of your back.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how I got into her.
That's what I was thinking. I think yoga is really good for everything like that. Yeah.
The doctor will see you now.
Well, great to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Thank you all. That was great. Appreciate it. So in many situations, like being at a doctor's office or dentist's office, or being at an airport waiting for a plane, or a train station, bus station, whatever, where we don't have our time automatically structured for ourselves, we usually feel some compulsion to structure that time in some meaningful way. You know, that's why people pull out their cell phones or the latest novel or whatever to provide time structuring for themselves. Eric Berne talked about 6 different ways of structuring time, and I want to list those for you, both in terms of the intensity of stroking involved and also the degree of psychological risk. Psychological risk means the risk of rejection. So the first is what is called withdrawal. And that can be physical withdrawal, leaving the situation, or it can be simply mental withdrawal, just going inside and thinking of things, or internally, or whatever. The stroking involved in withdrawal is pretty much self-stroking. And it's usually through whatever kinds of fantasies we create internally. You know, we might create a positive fantasy and feel good, or a negative fantasy and feel bad. But most of the stroking is internal. And so there's little degree of psychological risk unless somebody gets upset with you for withdrawing, like your spouse or whoever. A second way of structuring time is what Berne called rituals. Rituals are very precise, prescribed ways of interacting with one another. One example is the greeting ritual. Hello, hello, how are you? Fine, thank you. Good to see you. See you later. Now, in rituals, people keep very precise count of the strokes. So if I say hello, you say hello, I say how are you, and you don't respond, I feel offended, I feel cheated. I've given you 2 strokes and you've only given me 1 back. So people will be very aware of the amount of stroking that they give. And there are also more formal rituals like Robert's Rules of Order for business meetings, or fraternal rituals or religious rituals that we use in church. The value of rituals is a way of exchanging strokes and structuring time in a way that everybody knows, and we don't have to stop and figure out how we're going to conduct the meeting or whatever we're doing.
Funerals and weddings.
Pardon? Funerals and weddings are another example, 2 other examples. And there's a little greater degree of risk in rituals because if I say hello to you, you might just turn away and not respond. So it feels a little more vulnerable to say hello to somebody, to make contact with somebody, than it does just to sit and think your own thoughts. A third way of structuring time is what Berne called pastimes. Pastimes are the kinds of conversations we have at cocktail parties or other situations. And the primary purpose of pastimes are to get to know the other person, to see if this is somebody that I want to establish a more intimate relationship with. The couple here, when they first started out, the 2 people, a lot of what they were doing was pastiming in terms of have you been to this doctor before? What's he like? Or that kind of thing. And over the course of time, they really moved to more intimate conversation, sharing details about why they were there and so forth. So pastimes are a way of kind of feeling out the other person psychologically to see if this is somebody I connect with. You know, at cocktail parties, there's some people you say hello to, and after a couple of minutes, you're ready to move on. There are other people you make contact with, and you really feel a connection, and things click, and you begin to move into a really deeper, more intimate conversation with them. In pastimes, also there's a little greater degree of psychological risk, because I'm beginning to share more about what my values are for my parent, what my feelings are for my child. And again, it feels a little more risky in terms of the possibility of other people not agreeing with me or saying, oh, that's stupid or whatever. A fourth way of structuring time is what Berne called activities. Activities are anything that results in a product. People are into problem solving in some way or doing some task. Activities are pretty much a function of the adult ego state. And the stroking involved in activities is mostly delayed stroking. Strokes at the end of a job, either well done or poorly done. There might be a progress report along the way, but most of the strokes come at the end. And there's a little greater degree of psychological risk because I'm revealing something about my competency or incompetency in an activity. Fifth way of structuring time is what Berne referred to as psychological games. Games are an attempt to get fairly intense strokes and try to avoid the psychological risk by shifting the responsibility for the outcome to the other person. So if something bad happens, I can convince myself it was really the other person's fault. There are different degrees of games, as we will talk about later when we get to games. But first-degree games are games that are socially acceptable. The kind of banter we do it in work situations where we really don't have protection psychologically to be intimate, so we often tease and kid each other and so forth, all in fun, and people don't take it seriously because they know we're joking and that sort of thing. First-degree games like that can be very helpful to exchange strokes in a situation where there's not the protection for intimacy, for going to a deeper level of transacting with each other. The most satisfying form of structuring time is what Berne called intimacy. That's an open, game-free relationship in which people allow themselves to be vulnerable and to be fully revealing. Of course, that feels the most vulnerable of all, the most risky, but it's also the most satisfying. And Berne pointed out that it's important to know these different ways of structuring time so that we can move through these as appropriate in a situation and not get stuck in any one. They're all useful in certain contexts. Like when you first come to a meeting like this, you probably will withdraw initially in terms of getting a seat and getting your things together to take notes and sort of getting the lay of the land. And then there are probably people around you will engage in a greeting ritual with. And then as you continue to talk, you may pass time about, have you ever been to a TA 101 course like this before? Or what do you think about TA? Or those kinds of things. And the activity you're probably willing to participate in, which is teaching and learning and taking notes and all of that. You may tease some other people, enter into some first-degree games. Hopefully you won't go beyond that. And there are probably certain people in the workshop that you really feel a connection with and you begin to form a more intimate, have a more intimate conversation with over time as you go along. Anything y'all want to add to that?
I was just thinking about
You got
how.
the mic?
Sorry. If you all, in our workshops, we create certain rituals for people a check-in ritual and a check-out ritual, and I'm thinking about how that is a way that we want to invite people to begin the journey of getting to know each other in a safe way. But that is, when I say safe, I mean psychologically. It's a low risk in terms of what people can share. And we do have the expectation that each person will share or that they will pass so that their voices are heard. And we also are taking into account that in different cultural contexts, withdrawal is a way that people enter a space. And some people enter a space by talking. And so we want to create the possibility of each person having space to be sorry about that, to be fully who they are. That's one thing. The other thing is that to be clear that the notion of intimacy is about authenticity and sharing about oneself. This is not, so just sometimes intimacy can have the connection to sexuality, but we're talking about authenticity in relationships.
Right. It's a really good point,
Yeah.
because those two often get confused in our culture.
Right. And the goal in the workshops, a lot of the work that happens as people, going back to my first point, if I am coming into a session and I'm around people who are culturally different than me, the process of being willing to reveal myself takes time. And so these time structuring, if you think about the workshops you might have facilitated, you may see how the group moves through this process. And our job as facilitators often is to interrupt games that might start to come up that go from first degree to other degrees. So that's another thing. When we talk about games, I think you'll see how a lot of our interventions are about that, to invite people to move toward intimacy and or to stay at those other levels.
Two thoughts came to my mind. One was in terms of rituals and the example that Van gave, which is hello, how are you? You work with people and there's a certain level of ritual that you're there every morning. How's everything? Good. See you later, and part. Then somebody goes on vacation for a week or two and comes back, and the conversation is much longer. The ritual is longer to catch up with all the strokes that were missed during the vacation time. Talk a little longer about it's amazing how we just automatically do that. The only example that I remember Berne giving in terms of intimacy was two soldiers in a foxhole during war, and the threat of death, and feeling very intimate and very connected. Intimacy is that the whole concept of the okayness that we were talking about yesterday, the unconditional okayness, where defenses are down and we are in with each other from our okay to okay place. I think that any time that we're feeling that, we're feeling intimate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think that's one way to think about it. And I also think it's very practical to think about the way that Van described it, because I see in the workshops that we do that people do move through this process. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I just would say that the abstract part is theoretical, but when people are in the workshops, and even in that conversation, we saw them be very specific about moving through some of the steps that he made. Other questions?
I understand the increasing degree of psychological risk. What I understand less is how the intensity of stroking decreases?
Increases.
It increases.
It also increases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the visual's a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much.
One of the really helpful things for me in doing group therapy was Berne said, if you don't let people withdraw or engage in rituals, and you don't let them just sit and pass time, and you don't let them play games, the only things you're left with are activities, which is fulfilling their contracts, or intimacy, which is therapeutic in and of itself. So that's really been a helpful guide in doing group therapy, to think about how people are structuring their time and what will produce the greatest results as you're doing therapy.
I'm just thinking of time structure when people are retiring. It's like, what am I going to do with my time?
That's
It's
right.
a real scare. And when you get to another environment, we have our rituals at home that we do all day. And we get like to the hotel and we're here, and all of a sudden time structure changes. Mm-hmm. And I'm also thinking of people when they lose somebody to death or divorce or something. Stroking and time structuring is a great loss, and we have to start from scratch in terms of creating a stroking to fulfill that, and also how to structure time.
Can you give some examples of withdrawal?
Yes, I'm sitting in here and I get bored and I start thinking about what I'm going to do at lunchtime.
So we all do this?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yeah, all of these are normal, natural ways of structuring time. And what's important is to have choice about it. Yeah.
A slightly strange one, but the role of pets when it comes to stroking, where would you put that on the scale?
Very high.
Intimacy?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pets are a source of unconditional positive strokes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, something that's coming up for me around the different location that ritual has to intimacy is just how both political and intimate rituals can feel in different cultural spaces, and how much risk is attached to failing in those spaces. And I know that it's being used a little differently, but that's just a tension that I'm noticing in
Right.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.